Each life we incarnate into has a divine purpose. For the majority of people on this planet, their purpose has eluded them. We have become so distracted with the struggle to survive that we have forgotten what we are here to do. In alignment with the sacred laws of nature, the ultimate purpose of all existence is to create and evolve. We certainly do not incarnate into life with the intention to destroy. And yet, we have come to live in a very destructive world. As a result, there are many out there who feel lost or adrift, whilst knowing deep down inside that something is very wrong with their reality. Many people wish they could do something of value, anything that is purposeful, instead of having to submit to a system of slavery in order to survive. It is important never to let go of that feeling. That is your soul crying out to you, telling you that your life has value and that you do indeed have a purpose. The most important thing you can do in life is to recognize your purpose, and often that requires a lot of soul searching. Life indeed dishes out some pretty tough challenges, which will either move you closer towards your purpose path, or will give you great training for when you finally realize what it is that you came here to do. But more often than not, the very clues about your life's purpose are hidden in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of our existence. But we are so easily distracted by irrelevant details that don't really matter, that often we miss the very obvious right in front of us. It is because of our willful ignorance of anything that does not fit our preconceived ideas that the truth about the nature of our reality is so readily hidden in plain sight. This is a very deep and personal journey, which has come to be expressed in many aspects throughout my life. This is not just an attempt to retell a bunch of research and pass it off as my own, for I am very grateful and openly acknowledge all the many wonderful people that I have been given the opportunity to work with and to learn from in order to get to the point where I've come to know what I now know. This is a journey I was always destined to go on, and likewise, how I have come to know this information forms as much a part of the story as the information itself.
Your life.
Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Mel V, and tonight is episode 4 of Dragonology. So I hope you're all settled in for the evening, and hopefully you're ready for some interesting information. Today, of course, is April the 16th, 2015, 9 p.m. London and Morocco time, 10 p.m. here in Central Europe, and of course, my home country of South Africa, and 4 p.m. in New York. And of course, for those people who are in Sydney who managed to get up, it is 6 a.m. there, and it's Friday morning. Wow. Okay. I'm going to just dive straight in tonight because we have quite a lot to get through. And I guess we just pick up from where we were last week with episode 3. Last week, we really got tucked into culture and cult culture and the root of all culture. And
We're going to continue a bit with that this evening. And just to pick up on last week's meme, which is the fact that all is rooted in dragonology. All our history, everything comes back to several defining principles, which we will categorically define, but they're very specific themes. They're very recognizable, they're very repetitive, and they keep coming up throughout the course of human history. And this is something we cannot ignore. We need to look seriously at the real evidence before us that has left clues about our past so that the people of today can understand what's really happened. Because most people have received, not really an education, more like an indoctrination. So what we covered off last week was the fact that dragon worship and dragons in themselves, or whatever you want to call them, we have kind of just tagged it down to the word dragon for now, and which is why I reference the series as Dragonology. These creatures, these beings, whatever they were the root of our culture, our cult culture. And this can be found in all things that are sort of auxiliary to us, including theatre, music, and the entertainment industry. So what our aim is through the course of Dragonology, and this is an ongoing theme through what we're doing, but specifically today, and the reason I haven't laid this out previously is because I didn't want to give anybody the idea that we had a specific end goal direction. Rather, I just wanted to lay the evidence out and let people see where it was going. But of course, there is an aim, and the aim of this particular series, particularly this episode, is to demonstrate that all culture is indeed cult culture, and that all cults are linked by their common origin, which is dragon worship. And popular culture is in fact controlled by dragons or dragon cults. And just a little bit of revision so that we can tie together what we've been through the last 3 episodes in terms of what we learned of the etymology, because we're going to be covering this off again tonight and having a look at a number of these themes which keep recurring. And why it is important to keep recognizing the themes is because once you start to understand the template, it becomes easy to apply to the words as you go through. And then you don't need me to tell you or give you my interpretation of meanings. You're able to actually pick them out for yourselves as you decode the language. So starting from my favorite one, which is the one we use most commonly, which is the or root, which you will find, of course, coming up in various sequences and combinations. But that transliterates into orf with a PH. That was the phi sound, which was actually done as a circle with a line through it. So orf, and then offy. And the I transliterates into the E and the Y sound, as is common with many vowel sounds. They transliterate into each other, as I shall demonstrate in the next sequence. We spoke a bit about the Kolu root last week, and in fact the week before, being the root of Colum, Columbus, Columbia, Kulu, Kula, the root of Dracula, Kala, and Kali, all the same dragon root. And then the next sequence of root words pertaining to serpentine or dragon etymology, of course, is the Pala, Para, Pio root, which of course is the roots of words such as paradise, parade, palace, and pharaoh. Then, of course, there's the Spiro root, and Spiro means dragon, and Spiro is the root of spirit, as in ghost or alcoholic spirits, spiral, and spy, as in I spy with my little eye, or perhaps espionage. Both fit the category. Phantom obviously comes from the root word fein. Fein, of course, is a god that we shall discuss a bit more tonight. We have gone through this particular god in previous Dragonology episodes, so fein should not be new to you guys. But fein transliterates into the word pane, as in window pane. And we shall get into the significance of windows, panes, and glass as we get into this night's episode. Then, of course, we have the jins, initially spelled with a D-J-E-N. It transliterates into D-J-I-N, and then just jin with a J, gene, genie, genius, and then the Hebrew version of genius is geoni, and then, of course, Genesis, which is the beginning, and then you've got the word origin, which also means something to do with the beginning, right? Like the Genesis, and you've got the or root and the jin root in there. Very important, of course, and then jin, like the spirit, is an alcoholic spirit. Then we've got the next line and sequence of words, which we look at God, which transliterates into good. Again, that transliterates into goat, ghost, host, go, and gone, as in dragon. And then we've got Atha, which transliterates into A-V-E, other, or other. And then we've got the E, which again transliterates into the A, and of course the double A transliterates into the double E. Now, it's not hard to understand how the V and F sounds are transliterated, because if you are a speaker of both English and Dutch, I grew up in South Africa, my native tongue is Afrikaans, which is a derivative of Dutch, you'll know that the V sound is actually an F sound. You say the V in Dutch and in Afrikaans as a F, not a V sound. That the V sound is an English language sound. So F and V are transliterated commonly to those who are both speakers of English and Dutch. It's very understandable. Then you've got the three root words of light. You've got the L, which is the Arabic, the Il, which is the Latin, and the El, which is the Hebrew, alluding to the Elohim, the Il, the Illuminati, and Al, which is illusory to Allah. Okay. And then we have the Basileus, which of course is an ancient Greek and Latin word for king. And that is most similar or cognitive with the word basilisk, which is known as the king of snakes. And the term most similar, I have not found another word closer to the word basilisk than obelisk. And obelisk forms a little bit of the material that we'll be covering off tonight. So just picking up a bit from where we finished off last week, starting with a bit of music, a few more clues that I picked up while I was researching this. I couldn't help throwing it in. And since we did cover off musical culture last week, I thought I'd put these little clues in because they really do enrich the material and only give more evidence as to what I've been saying about the roots of music, the effects of music, and the controllers of music. So music, all sound has vibrational frequency that has an effect on the environment. If anyone is unfamiliar with the science of cymatics, Google it, cymatics with a C-Y, and see for yourself the amazing designs that form when different sound frequencies are played over various particles. And you can actually see they form, creative designs depending on what sound frequency goes through them. And this is very much demonstrated with the work of Masaru Emoto, who I had the great pleasure of meeting. I think it was back in 2009. And unfortunately, I didn't get to interview him because he only spoke Japanese. But he was the one who's introduced this idea of the fact that sound and vibrational frequencies actually have an effect on the shape of water and how water actually forms in terms of the messages it carries and what that actually looks like visually. So absolutely, sound has an effect on the environment. For example, heavy rock music would form different shaped ice crystals to perhaps classical music. And this is very clearly demonstrated in Masaru Emoto's experiments. So sound frequency is an aspect of the creative generative principle of all creation. Destructive sounds show unhealthy destructive images and formations of patterns. And of course, the ones that are generative, that are creative, they obviously produce a more harmonious and beautiful pattern. The manipulation of sound and frequency means the manipulation of reality, quite literally. Sound, light, and energy are inextricably linked. If you can control those, you can control everything about the world. Etymology of music. The word music is rooted in the concept of the muses. And we covered off the muses at the end of last week's Dragonology when we talked about inspiration. The muses are said, you talk about, oh, that's such and such is my muse, such and such is your inspiration. But there's a little bit more going on here than just inspiration. If you understand anything to do with the Faustian pacts and how people contract with other beings from other worlds, perhaps reptilian, perhaps dragon, whatever you want to call them, for promises of talent and fame, well, this is really what the muse concept is really all about. The story has sort of taken on different allegories as it's sort of been passed down through time, but ultimately it comes back to the same theme. And in fact, the original meaning of music quite literally means art of the muses. And the muses were said to be the daughters of Zeus. And Zeus was the Greek version of what then became Jupiter when Rome invaded Greece and took over all their gods. And then obviously Jupiter then became Saint Peter when Roman pantheism was replaced with Roman monotheism. And of course, there were 9 muses who were the daughters of Jupiter, and that becomes important as we go through. We touched a bit on the importance of the 9 dragon, sons of the dragon, which is prevalent in Chinese mythology. And this 9 theme continues. They love the number 9. Let's look at the etymology of the word melody. Now, this was interesting, obviously very similar to my own name. So I've been looking into the root of the word mel for some time. And the word mel actually means dark or black. And this is evident in words such as melanoma, melanin, melanosis, or caramel. And let me explain that one. The process of caramelization, if you talk about you caramelize a sugar, it's a process of darkening. And that's what melanosis means. It means a process of going black or darkening. Now, melanin is a dark skin pigment which protects us from the sun, and that's what forms in freckles. That's what gives you your tan when you go into the sun. And melanoma is a dark-colored skin cancer. And that, basically all proves the fact that mel quite literally refers to dark or black. Okay, and that becomes important when we go into the Melusine stories, which we'll do in another Dragonology. But yes, that's where the word caramel gets its meaning from, because it is the darkening of milk. Cara actually refers to the milk quality. In fact, a Khan milk refers to buttermilk in Dutch, and that's the CAR root you've got there. So that refers to the milk part, and the mel is actually the darkening part. So when you make if you can make caramels, quite literally cooking cream and sugar together, and they darken to get that beautiful dark brown color. Okay, before I get to Hungary, I'll move on to the next bit of melody, and it's ode, O-D. Ode means song. We talked about last week tragody, which means tregos, and ode, which basically means goat song. It's the same here. Mel means dark, ode means song. So melody quite literally means dark song. So when you talk about, you compose a melody, you sing a melody. And to be honest with you, that is the most commonly used term when referring to a melody, is, and literally translates to dark song. Interesting. We spoke a lot last week about the function of the chorus within Greek theatre. And in terms of music, we're going to talk about what a chorus actually is. Now, the chorus is normally a partner song where you'd sing a couple of verses and then you'd sing the chorus, which is a set of verses. You sing a different verse and then the chorus is repeated. And this is the common structure. In fact, there are very few songs, pop songs or other, that are written and are not in this format with a choral part. And this seems to be almost like an instituted structure to songs. And funny enough, this instituted structure of songs, which seems to pop up in every single song that gets released, is called strophic form. No jokes. You've got the serpent root word in here, ophi. For those who've been following along, you'll know how significant that is. You cannot make this stuff up, folks. So basically, a verse repeating in a song is known as strophic form and references the repetition of a chorus, which is the format of most modern songs. So what is the purpose of repeating? Repetition of sound, be it the repetition of verse, words, or, for example, the chorus, and chorus as well has a serpent root word in it, reinforces the spell and prolongs the vibrational frequency and heightens the intensity and potentially the impact, the potency, and the power. So, tying into the themes of culture, we've basically touched on a little bit of from where we were last week, and we're now going to be moving forward just a little bit onto some of our other themes. Some of the other cultural aspects that I'm going to cover off tonight, which are absolutely essential to get your head around, to understand how they are pretty much all rooted or controlled at the very least by the serpentine aspect. All there, a lot of it locking down that Ophidian vibration through ritualism, through symbolism, through covert allegory. So obviously cultural aspects include art, sculpture, architecture, and sport. And it's not a far stretch of the imagination to say whoever controls the images in terms of media, be it painting, sculpture, art, whatever, whoever controls the images controls the culture. And before computers, TV, and before cinemas and satellite, art, sculpture, and architecture were used to reinforce controlling mechanisms in society. Many have symbolically represented aspects of dragon worship. Okay, let's have a look at the etymology of architecture, some of the things that you need to be aware of. Okay, so we've spoken about the or, serpent root word, O-R, the one right at the first one that we always start with, the most common aspect, the or. Okay, now, as we've already discussed, vowel sounds sometimes transliterate and swap out with each other, and the or sound becomes the R sound. So it just also depends on which country you're in. For example, if you're Irish, the or and the R sound are pretty much pronounced near enough dead on the same as each other. So basically the R sound, let's have a look at this and deconstruct the word architecture. Okay, so you got architecture, which obviously architecture is created by an architect. That word further breaks down into a smaller root of archon, which we will get into in a minute, and arc, which obviously then comes down to the arc with just the C, and then we show the root of that, which is the orc, and the or root word. And just to demonstrate when you're speaking exactly how or transliterates into R, the transliteration of or into R is evident in the similarity of whore and war. Do they not sound the same? Whore and war. You couldn't tell the difference between the two. Just because they're written or symbolically represented differently doesn't mean the sound is different. And remember, sound is living. Written word is dead. And we've gone through that when we were talking about how we use stamps and seals and embossing to raise dead word, to actually give it life by raising it. Okay, so I spoke a bit about the orc as the root, and just to tie that back in for you guys who don't know what orcs are, perhaps you don't watch Lord of the Rings, but the concept of an orc is not born in Lord of the Rings. The orc or orcus has been represented throughout mythology in various forms, and this is a computer-generated, I think, one from a computer game of an orcus. But yeah, there were actually these creatures, orcs, in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Not terribly dragon-looking, but certainly not human. And then, of course, the orc transliterates from the OR into the AR, as discussed, into arc and arch. And that's obviously the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Just to recap, basically on some of the root words and introduce you to a couple of new things here. We've already covered the theme in previous dragonology lectures about the fact that dragons, gods, and royalty are inextricably linked to each other. And this is evident when you start to do the work of deconstructing the root word etymology. And I'll just take you through a few basic ones here, just as an example. Pala, para, and pure, which are a triad of root words, which I consider to be serpentine or dragon etymology. Pala, obviously, root word of palace, which is where royalty lives. Para, for example, pharaoh, comes from this root. Basileus, being the Greek or Latin word for king, and basilisk, being the king of serpents. We also spoke as well about the and theoi. The is the gods, like theology or theosophy. There's various, many roots actually. Thesaurus for the word the, and theoi obviously just being the plural. Then here are the two that we're going to talk a little bit about today. Raja, Regus, and Rex. Now, Rex is the Latin word for king. They talk about Tyrannosaurus Rex. Regus, I think, is Greek. But Raja is what you call the Maharaja, the Indian king, the equivalent of the Indian king or the Sultan, or whatever you want, the title of the ruler or the royalty, Raja. Okay, we'll get into that in a second. And of course, arch or archon. Okay, talk about the archangel, the head angel, or archons. And we'll also discuss a little bit about that in a minute. The archons is a Greek expression of ruler or to rule. So that is where you hear a lot about this in our so-called circles of conspiracy and research, the archons, and it originates with the Greek concept of the rulers or to rule. And the rulers and royalty were inextricably linked to dragons, or in fact were of the dragon bloodline, Porphyrogenitus or Purpleborn, which is again why, of course, we reference everything to do with the dragons in purple, just in case anyone didn't know. So archon provides the root word for monarch and anarchy. Okay. And then polyarchy. And of course, Noam Chomsky said, America is not a democracy, it's a polyarchy. And for those of you who will be around this Sunday, I think it's the 19th, we have the New Earth Nation doing a symposium at 12 midnight on Sunday evening, and Noam Chomsky will be at the symposium live talking to us, someone I hugely admire, so do tune in for that, guys. All right, we spoke about the 9, how important the 9 is, and here we go. The archons, there are 9 archons of Athens. There were 9 ring lords that were enslaved to the Dark Lord Sauron and became the ring wraiths. Okay, again, a concept of selling your soul and being enslaved to the devil. 9 muses, the inspiration, the people that you would potentially contract with for fame and fortune. 9 sons of the dragon supposedly seated the emperors of China. And of course, 9 archons of Athens, supposedly the daughters of Zeus, the most primordial or top god of the Greek pantheon. So the dragons love the number 9. Interesting. Okay, and of course, taking you to a little bit about the Maharaja, if I can just get my mouse to work. There we go. The Maharaja. As we spoke about already, the Raja, this is the word we're looking at. Raja, Regus, and Rex all reference the same thing, which is dragons, rulers, or royalty. And this is where you start to see the R-A-G of dragon, okay, coming into effect here, because it's not a far stretch for anyone who knows a couple of different languages to understand just how J and G transliterate into each other. In fact, even in language, I beg your pardon, even in English, the J and the G sometimes take on the same J sound. G is not always said as the hard G. It is sometimes said J, like the J sound. Okay, so the G is sometimes said as J. For example, George. All right. So it's not hard to see why the G is transliterated for the J in Raja, and how that forms the root of dragon. Interesting. Okay, moving on to the etymology and meaning of architect and the words associated with it. Architect quite simply means master builder, director of works, which is cognizant with the concept of God or creator. And we spoke a lot about this over the last few weeks with regards to how the Ophidian vibration is locked down, particularly in architecture with the use of very specific things, which you see coming up again and again. These guys don't seem to deviate off a very specific set of architectural designs. And, you know, it's amazing to see how many buildings actually look almost identical. The same columns, the same arches, the same domes. Oh, more stained glass windows, another obelisk. Oh, checkered tiles on the floor. Lovely. So what does that all mean? Okay, well, let's start with arches. Arches or arcs, you know, McDonald's has the golden arcs, are common features in churches, temples, and other sacred places, and not terribly easy to make. Mind you, folks, it was the Romans who perfected the art of arch making by creating what they called a keystone, which is a little wedge-shaped stone, which is slightly bigger than all the others, and it's kind of jammed into place to kind of push all the others into place as well. And in fact, this keystone technique of building arches was so successful that they actually arches are some of the longest standing structures, some of the aqueducts and whatnot made with arches, because of how strong that keystone structure of architecture actually is. So for big buildings, lots of weight, lots of masonry and stonework, arches were a natural choice for strength, but also for their symbolic expression. Some people say they represent the female generative principle or the vagina. That could be true. This is the inside of Roslyn Chapel, and I have mentioned before that I have in fact been to this place. It's incredibly beautiful and a little eerie, but if you notice some of the incredibly beautifully carved stone masonry they've got going on in this church, it's just the most phenomenal place to think these were all carved by hand. And of course you've got the apprentice pillar at the back here in a lovely spiral. We'll get on to spirals in a minute. Arches and columns are inextricably linked. Where you see arches, you will normally find columns, okay? And they do provide a lot of strength to structures by channeling the weight of the building down onto particularly strong marble or granite, which is a very, very hard stone. So this is actually, apart from the symbolic significance, structurally helps keep this church up. This is, in fact, the interior of the Hagia Sophia, which has got columns taken from so many older different temples. And there are very few of them that are actually, you don't find it. They're all kind of, you find maybe four the same and then a whole bunch of different ones, but it was made up of a number of different temples. And in fact, one earlier than it stood on its place, and it has in fact been rebuilt. And looted and rebuilt and changed from a Catholic cathedral into a mosque and then into a museum. And anyway, the arches and columns are prevalent in churches, temples, palaces, and official buildings and other sacred places. And you start to see these spirals turning up, the Fibonacci sequence spirals turning up on the top of columns in what we call the Ionic style capitals. And Greek architecture basically came in three styles, and these three styles were determined by the types of columns that were used, in particular, what kind of capitals were placed on top of them. As I said, these are called Ionic. There were two other styles, both with serpent root words in them. One was a Doric style, it's got the OR root word, and the other one was the Corinthian style, also with the OR root word. So the other two styles do actually reference serpents in the name, and then the one that doesn't have the OR root actually has spirals, so it's more visual as opposed to a verbal symbolic representative of dragon Ophidian vibration lockdown in architecture. Now, these guys didn't just put the spirals on the top of the columns, they made the columns spiral. And spiral columns are very, very common. In fact, when you start to look for these things, you'll be amazed in how many places these things turn up. And I really do particularly like these ones because they've got a lot of symbolism going on here. We spoke a bit last week, of course, about grapes and grapevine being symbol of blood and the holy dragon bloodline. So this one's got it all going on. You've got a little bit of Corinthian going on here. You'll find these kind of peeling back leaves on the Corinthian columns. You've got the Ionic capitals with the golden means spirals, and spiral is rooted in the word spiro, which means dragon. And then, of course, you've got the spiral columns, which ironically are called Solomonic. So you have a spiral column that's called Solomonic columns. And if my dear friend Dee is watching, this obviously touches onto the rabbit hole she fell down and took us on Inconspicuous News last night, because we were talking about the Queen of Sheba, who was in fact the wife of King Solomon. And interestingly enough, these are called Solomonic columns, which reference spiral columns, and spiral always references the serpent. Needless to say, the central altar of St. Peter's Basilica is in fact a Solomonic styled column altar. Check it out. Don't these things look like serpents to you? The serpent columns of St. Peter's Basilica are famous, in fact, and if you Google serpent columns, this is one of the first pictures you come up with. But interesting to note the Holy Spirit window at the back there with the dove, which we, of course, covered off in previous Dragonology lectures, and, of course, the dome in the immediate vicinity, and an arch, which we'll get into the domes in just a second. But as we've already mentioned, Basileus and basilisk are cognitive with each other. And of course, the word basilica is cognizant with the word basileus. And I beg your pardon. Basilica is cognitive with the words basileus and basilisk, which in turn is cognitive with obelisk. Again, my challenge to anyone, bring me a word that's closer to basilisk than obelisk. I can't find it. So there must be some connection. Now, just to show you how they use all the symbolism to lock down the serpent vibration, particularly in those who are Porphyra Gentius of the dragon bloodline, royal born. Most popes, kings, rulers, and royalty, and high-ranking members of the priesthood tend to be from this dragon bloodline, or at least part, hemithoi, meaning half-dragon. And this is the tomb of Pope Alexander VII and contains key symbolic architectural aspects symbolic of the dragon, including the arch, as we can see here, the dome, and the columns. These are Corinthian-style columns over here. Okay. So you can see they lock it down with several different means: arch, dome, and column. Normally inextricably linked. Again, we're back inside the Hagia Sophia, one of my most favorite cathedrals in the whole world. There's so much going on in this beautiful place. I'd really love to go back there someday. But it truly does have one of the most spectacular domes, because all the light pours in here and it makes it look like this dome is actually floating on a disc of light. And you can imagine this is an incredibly difficult structure to get right, particularly considering how old this thing is. To have windows in the domes itself is quite an architectural feat, to be perfectly honest with you. You can imagine how much weight is coming down on these guys here. They'd have to be pretty strong to hold that all up. But it's an amazing structure, truly worthwhile taking a look if you ever get to Istanbul. And obviously, domes has significance too, and it's taken from the Greek root word domas, which means, I beg your pardon, which is also the root of dominate and domination, and of course, domesticate, which is another word for enslave, and doom. So architecture and symbolism. All right, let's take a look at this. The same symbolic indicators turn up in all religions and their associated sacred places. ultimately linking all religions to a common root of dragon worship. And of course, just across the way, and it's literally not even a 5 minute, not even a 2 minute walk. You go from the Hagia Sophia, you cross over a big quad, and you're in the vicinity of the Blue Mosque, which in fact is a building that's somehow even more spectacular than the Hagia Sophia. There are the most incredible domes. This whole thing is just literally domes on the inside, but a little bit more modern. This is only 500 years old, whereas the Hagia Sophia is at least 2,000 years old. But this is an amazing building. And in fact, out of the two, it's probably the one that I enjoy visiting the most. Spoke about earlier, checkered floors. This is the St. Paul's Cathedral, which is just east of the City of London, the banking heart or the banking district of London that controls the global financial aspects from its heart there. And St. Paul's, obviously, you can see it's got a sun symbol in the middle over here, but all around it, tessellated floors, black and white tiles. And that's very common. Sometimes you found them put up on the walls in churches, like a little data rail with a couple of checkered tiles, tessellated floors. And these are hugely symbolic. And these tessellated floors come up again and again in Masonic temples, all sorts. And basically, what is very interesting about this is they really do quite clearly and symbolically illustrate the Jesuit meme of black is white and white is black. All right. Spoke a bit about the obelisk just now. Obelisk being similar to the word basilisk, which is in turn similar to the word basileus, and of course basilica. Now, it's just a coincidence, but guess what? Oh, I skipped one. There is an obelisk outside St. Peter's Basilica. The obelisk is a common occurrence in places significant to dragons and is symbolic of a serpent. Now, then if you were watching Johan Oldenkamp's presentation before we came on here, he quite accurately pointed out that there are obelisks in the 3 Empire State cities, which is, of course, New York, Washington, D.C., Vatican City, and London. And obelisk is, of course, as I said, cognizant with the word basilisk, which in turn is etymologically similar to basileus, meaning king. All right, let's talk a bit about how things went down before our time. Up until about 200 years ago, it was pretty difficult if you were a peasant or you didn't come from a wealthy merchant class or aristocratic family, or you weren't in the clergy, you were just a commoner. It was pretty difficult to get anywhere. In fact, even trades were very protected. It's not just a secret occult knowledge. There were trade guilds set up, and they were, in their time, pretty much like exclusive secret societies, keeping the secrets of particular trades within those particular guilds. And in certain cities, only people who were members of these guilds could practice those particular trades. So it's not unlike a secret society or a close fraternal organization. So guilds, secret societies, and Freemasonry are inextricably linked, because Freemasonry was effectively a trade guild, okay, for stonemasons who all got endowed with the secrets of occult knowledge and symbolism. Otherwise, how on earth would they have carved all those beautiful symbols as we've spoken about in Rosslyn Cathedral or Rosslyn Chapel, for example? So the occult knowledge of symbolism, sacred geometry and architecture, stonemasonry, sculpture and art was controlled and passed down by a select few to a selected few who were initiated into the secrets and had knowledge of the true meaning of the symbolic expression and what they represented. And of course, this is stone carving of the Mason symbol of the square, right angle square, and compass. The Masons are obsessed with squares. And as I mentioned, crafts and trade guilds were exclusive membership-only organization which dominated certain trades and crafts. And in some parts, only members of these guilds were allowed to practice their trade and craft. And this is just a little bit that I've pulled off the internet, which I thought I'd read through to you. So it's not me making this up. This is actually research that has come from pretty good sources. In most of Europe, craft and professions had been governed by guilds for centuries, ever since the expansion of towns and cities in the Middle Ages. These sworn associations controlled trade, limited outside competition, established standards of quality, and set rules for training of apprentices. Membership was usually compulsory. Only guild members could practice their trades within a city and its territory. Most guilds originated as religious organizations. They continued to serve as social and religious function, organizing celebrations on feast days, sponsoring lay brotherhoods, and providing charitable support to the widows and families of their members. Sounds like the Knights of Malta or Freemasons today. In the 1200s, Florentine painters had joined the Arte de I can't speak Italian. Arte de Medici e Speciali. My Italian friends are going to slay me. The Guild of Physicians, Apothecaries, and Spice Merchants. Their association with these professions is not as improbable as it may at first seem, since the apothecaries and spice dealers were suppliers of pigments. Painters and doctors also shared a patron saint, which is Saint Luke, who was himself both a doctor and an artist, and said to have painted the Virgin and Child from life. Anyway, goldsmiths and those who worked with gold thread belonged to the Arte della Seta, together with silk workers. Sculptors and carpenters were members of the Arte dei Maestri di Pitria e Legnami. Pardon that. Architects did not have a guild per se. Most architects also worked in other arts. Many worked primarily as sculptors, as we have seen. By the end of the 13th century, the Medici e Speciali also included barbers, glass blowers, booksellers, potters, and makers of all manner of items, from knives to masks to tennis balls and rackets. As the status of artists rose, the old associations with manual crafts and trades came to be viewed as stifling to artists' professional aspirations. During the early 14th century, Florence's painters won limited independence from the guild to form the Company of St. Luke, an association that originated and continued to function as a religious confraternity. Somewhat later, sculptors were also admitted. That sculptors and painters saw themselves or their interests as united and distinct from other trades represented in their guilds suggests a new perception about their arts. New institutions evolved that reflected this transformation and helped promote it. Okay, this is a long-winded allegory for describing the birth of what we now call secret societies, or the initiated ones. Again, we've seen here, we have people who are allowed to engage in certain things and people who are not. Again, a limiting of, and a snobbery, so to speak, as well. Who became an apprentice, all that sort of thing, all very old paradigm, all very controlling. And none of it is really, think about this. There is no other way to go about engaging with knowledge than to make it freely available to anybody who wants to use it. It's not really up to me or anybody else to decide who gets to have certain knowledge and who doesn't. Ultimately, there are always going to be those who take knowledge and abuse it. Hopefully, they'll learn the lesson. The karma will kick them in the ass a few times and they'll come right. If not, they have to suffer it out and work things out for themselves. But ultimately, information is the common heritage of all beings. And the fact that in any way you have any controlling organization keeping certain trades and crafts and skills limited is already, the moment you install any kind of membership, and you use the word membership loosely here, we're actually referring to an initiation of sorts. You're installing the first steps of hierarchy. Membership is the first step to hierarchy. So remember the basics going forward as we climb into sculpture. As we say, sculptors and architects were inextricably linked. The basics being serpent symbolism masks the dragon. And, keep jumping, beg your pardon. What we got here are three children actually being consumed by a dragon. And this is a 1st century AD Roman sculpture. And this is, typically the kind of thing you'd find in people's homes. This is quite a common one that was showed up, just like the Pan and goat one that I've shown you. This is something that's very common depiction. This is one of these Greek names I just can never pronounce. So let me give it a try. Asclepius. Yay, I got it right. Asclepius, Greek god of medicine and surgery. Now, you can notice this guy's got a serpent twisted around his staff. And this is the origins of what then became Hermes, which carried the caduceus, which, of course, is the spiraling winged serpents. Notice all the serpent allegory here. Now, what's interesting to notice about Hermes, I think Hermes later did transliterate into the god Mars under the Romans. Hermes is often depicted with wings on his head, either Mars or Eros, but Eros is also Cupid. They do kind of all interlink into each other as they've been rebranded through time. But notice the wings on the head, and sometimes they even had wings on their feet and were referred to as serpentipedis or dragon-footed. Now you start to notice a common template and symbolic allegory coming through, and symbolic merging of various templatic or common themes. Here we have the spiraling serpents similar to the caduceus around what looks like a mother goddess figure. That's a feminine figure coming out of an egg. But look, we have wings, and is that the crown of liberty? Or perhaps solar rays, or representative of an aureola or a halo. All these things are absolutely part of serpent symbolism and allegory. Again, we see the serpent spiraling around the body when you go to look at the god Phanes, and of course coming out of the cosmic egg, which is also represented as going around him, depicting all 12 signs of the zodiac. And of course, you can see the wings over there on Phanes. And Phane, of course, is a very important root, the root of phantom, and pane as a window pane. And we'll get into that one as we go through this. And of course, we've spoken about this. This is one of the very first depictions I showed you in the first episode of Dragonology. Why we have called this series Dragonology and not mythology is because we do not want to limit the idea people can have of this particular genre of information by relegating it to one era in history that is controlled by the Romans, who in fact pretty much still control everything today, or so they think. Anyway, this is a very, very unique depiction of Mithra. And notice how similar Mithra and Phanes actually are, except in this lovely depiction of Mithra, you have a dragon or lion-looking face. And don't forget, the lion is also just more allegory and symbolism of the sun. The lion is a sun symbol, and the sun symbols mask the dragon. And of course, again, you've got them standing either on the moon or on a cosmic egg, or emerging out of a cosmic egg. And again, here, more carvings. Have a look at this, guys. What you've got here, we've spoken about this before. The frieze on the altar of the Pergamon, which is stuck in Berlin. You can thank Hitler for bringing all this lovely artifacts out of Germany into the Holy Roman Empire and sticking it in Berlin. But you've got a lot of this sort of thing going on here where you see these legs are actually serpenty, snake-type, windy things. Very clear depiction over here with scales on. The legs are becoming serpent tails. And this turns up everywhere. So that was obviously the altar of the Pergamon, carvings on the north frieze of the altar of the Pergamon, which was located in the ancient Greek Empire, which is actually part of Turkey now, where this originated from. But as I said, it was looted by Hitler, stuck in Berlin. So that's where that came from. And then the other corner of the world, which South America, you've got more of the serpent and dragon symbolism being, a lot of effort goes into making these things. Look at that, carved in. You've got scales. This, again, what you've got spiraling representation going up, spiral representation, Spiro, dragon, is being all represented here in the architecture. And of course, this is an Aztec pyramid. And so it said the Kukulcán or Quetzalcoatl would come down these steps, and Quetzalcoatl or Kukulcán, the plumed or feathered serpent, the dragons of the Mesoamericans. And then back up to North Africa, ancient Egypt, and we see this similar themes coming up there, carved into buildings. Here you have the Temple of Wadjet with the cobras carved into the walls. Remember, the cobra was a symbol of the Theban priesthood. The Amun priests at Thebes commonly used the golden cobra as their symbol. And this is a lovely piece from ancient Egypt, again depicting dragon worship. And once again, sun symbol is always irrestrictably linked with dragons, serpents, rulers, and it appears over here on the top of this Egyptian dragon or serpent. Okay, into the Proto-Indo-Indonesian, India sort of way of things, and we have what we call the Naga, and the NA of Naga forms the cognitive root of snake. You have the NA in the word snake. And these Naga statues and representations, pretty common actually. One of the ones I love the most is how they always seem to have several of these guys coming over their head. This is pretty common as well. Buddha sitting under the heads of the Naga. And again, what do you have? The spiraling serpents. These spiraling serpents, they're everywhere. And notice they often come in pairs. Spiraling paired serpents, as is with the caduceus, and we get into pairs in just a minute too. And of course, serpent and shape-shifting and half human, half snake allegory, a common theme of Genesis, and of course, Genesis rooted in the word jinn. And of course, this brings us back to the creational myth. One of the places we just keep coming back to is the creational story in the Garden of Eden, which, of course, the word paradise comes from the Edenic concept of paradise, and para is a serpent root word. So it just doesn't stop. It just goes on and on. This is a depiction on a column outside Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. I actually have seen this one. And they love to put dragons on buildings, from the gargoyles of Notre Dame to palaces, castles, churches. Recently I took a trip to Barcelona and we saw these things just absolutely everywhere. Serpents, dragons, griffins, mermaids, all sorts carved into old buildings. And, there again to either lock down the Ophidian vibration or be some serpent allegory of the domination of the dragons which rule and control our cult culture. Dragon statues are absolutely everywhere. You can find them in probably every major city that you go to. From London, this is the Basilisk of Basel. This is the Shield of Basel. And this is the emblem of Basel with a spiral. Interesting. So just to give you an idea of how this themes and symbolism carries through and ties everything together. What's interesting to note about all of this is it takes a lot of effort to make up these various sculptures. How would these artists or sculptors or architects or carvers know what to carve or what to create if these creatures did not exist? How did they have knowledge of these creatures or what they even looked like? I'm an artist, and one of the things that I've often tried to paint mermaids, and it's because these things you don't see them commonly, that you don't actually know if what you're painting is accurate or not. Now, I'm a stickler for accuracy. That's truth movement really is about trying to be as accurate or as close to the truth as possible. That's really what it's all about. and trying to paint something accurately or depict or sculpt something accurately when you don't really know what you're creating. It's almost impossible to do. These people must know what they're creating, what it looks like, and then how did they get that knowledge? Interesting. This is where we move on to art. And of course, it's already discussed the AR being serpentine root etymology, so depicted in purple. Many famous artists and sculptors were secret society initiates, endowed with sacred knowledge about dragons. The various symbolic representations that mask the existence of the dragon, including numerical codes and clues, are all hidden within various artworks of bygone artists. For these initiates, fame after death is secured. Now, let's go and have a little look here at some of these people. We start with Lucas Cranach the Elder. He was considered the most successful and famous German painter of all time. And of course, Germany is pretty much the very heart of the Holy Roman Empire, apart from Rome and Switzerland. And it still very much is, actually, probably the most Catholic country on earth. But basically, Lucas Cranach the Elder was a German Renaissance painter and printmaker, and he used to do these prints and make them from woodcuts and engravings, which is incredibly difficult to do, but he was phenomenally good at it. He was incredibly talented. Lucas Cranach the Elder was a court painter to the Electors of Saxony from 1504. Now, just to give you an idea, Saxony was actually a territory or a state of the Holy Roman Empire. From 1508, Cranach only signed his work with a winged serpent wearing a crown and carrying a ruby ring. You can see it over here, very interestingly depicted. And pretty much always the same depiction. Now, when you stop signing your name and you put the symbol of a crown-wearing dragon, and we keep coming back to things like Lord of the Rings, carrying a ruby ring, red, the symbol of blood, you know, there's a lot of things to look at here, okay? It's a lot of allegory going on. But why sign with a dragon? Why stop signing your name? And perhaps that was the secret code of what he really was inside. Perhaps something had taken him over. Perhaps that's what gave him his power, what he'd contracted with. Or perhaps he knew the true secret of what controlled this world and, you know, they wanted their symbols on it. Who knows? My bet is that after he was made a secret society initiate, it was then that he started using this dragon symbol to sign his work instead of using his name. And this is a woodcut of Lucas Cranach the Elder. As you can see, it's incredibly beautifully done and detailed. This is obviously, beg your pardon, the beast of the apocalypse, seven-headed dragon, and the whore of Babylon carrying what would be supposedly the Holy Grail. Notice how they're all bowing down and worshipping. Okay, now that is interesting allegory because you don't see that. Why are these people kings on their knees worshipping the seven-headed dragon and the whore of Babylon carrying the Holy Grail? Now, from last week's Dragonology, remember the Holy Grail is symbolic of the dragon bloodline, and we get into that more next week, as I should go on to discuss. Lucas Cranach sure was talented. This is an incredible piece of work. Remarkable detail, the Last Judgment, and actually this is meant to depict Martin Luther, but just absolutely phenomenal, but also a real indication as to his indoctrination and programming, which is very much the religious agenda, the cult indoctrination agenda. All religions come from a common source, a common origin, which is dragon worship, and all dragon worship is rooted in cult and ritual. This little painting has a hell of a lot going on if you've got a bit of time to spend looking at it. Again, some very interesting themes. Look, got these guys, skeletons, a crucifixion going on. Interesting to notice the INRI, I-N-R-I, I'll go on to talk about what INRI means when I go on to talk about the Jesuits in another dragonology lecture. But the fact that that is included on the top means that this is a depiction specifically designed for the Roman Catholic Church. You don't find the INRI on the top of any cross that isn't controlled by the Roman Catholic Church. Any religion, any Christianic sect that is controlled by the Roman Catholic Church will be the ones that have the INRI on top. And by that I also mean the Anglican Church, which if you look it up on Wikipedia is in fact controlled by the Catholic Church. Lots of interesting symbols in here. First, we've got a loose cross of St. George, which, as I said, often turns up in these kind of depictions. A dragon over here. Let's see how many serpent allegories we can pick up. Got a little dragon being slain here with the cross of St. George. So, we don't know if that's St. George because that's Christ, so that could be St. George. And saints are often depicted with halos. There's a halo there. Over here, we have what looks like Adam and Eve with a serpent in the tree. Okay. And then, not content with having St. George and the dragon, Adam and Eve and the serpent in the tree, we have, guess what, the third place that most commonly comes up, which is the brazen serpent story, the serpent upon the cross. You can make that out in the background there. And we went over that last week, exactly what the story of the brazen serpent is all about. And if you were listening to the lecture before this one, Johan Oldenkamp was talking about Thutmose III, who was one of the most powerful rulers in Egypt. He was actually known as Moses. And the brazen serpent story is irrevocably and irrestrictably linked with Moses. And, of course, pharaohs were normally of the dragon bloodline. So, again, a lot going on here. And, of course, Lucas Cranach's signature of the dragon, little dragon, you can check it out just over there. You can just barely make it out. And there's the wing. You see there's the ruby ring in its mouth and a tiny dot of a crown on top. Another interesting depiction of Lucas Cranach the Elder. We actually did visit upon this one, I think it was last week, when we were talking about the para root word being the root of paradise. Here, don't know what that is in the sky, whether that looks like the face of God, the all-seeing eye, perhaps eye in the sky. But interesting to notice here, again, a depiction of Adam and Eve, forbidden fruit tree, and a half-human, half-serpent being. That, for me, is the most telling over here. All right, moving on a bit from Lucas Cranach onto Michelangelo, who was an Italian painter, sculptor, architect, poet, and engineer of the High Renaissance, and who exerted unparalleled influence over the development of Western art. Now, the Sistine Chapel of Vatican City was apparently painted by Michelangelo laying on his back on some scaffolding. I mean, to paint a roof, you can't exactly take this thing down and put it on the floor and paint it. You have to lay on your back to paint it. I think it took him something like 26 years to finish the whole thing. An extortionately long period of time. But let me just say, you don't get to paint anything in terms of chapels, ceilings, and roofs within Vatican City unless you are a highly initiated secret society member, so that you know how to include all the necessary symbolic allegory, because it's all about the symbolism, folks. Never forget, symbolism has always been used as a method of subterfuge, and symbolism normally masks the existence of the dragon. And of course, the most iconic images from the Sistine Chapel ceiling being the creation of Adam, this one over here, and the fall of man, which interestingly enough has another, guess what, half human, half serpent being. He certainly knew something, Michelangelo. In fact, even his name is littered with serpentine etymology. And then the most obvious candidate for a secret society initiate being Mr. Leonardo da Vinci, a well-known member of the Priory of Sion, which is a traditionalist Catholic chivalric order or secret society, made famous in the film The Da Vinci Code. Clear indication of Leonardo da Vinci's initiation into the Priory of Sion is evidenced by Da Vinci's acknowledgement of the numerical code that alludes to the fact that Jesus is an astrotheological hybrid of a sun god. The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci, for me, is the clearest indication that he absolutely knew what was going on. And let's have a look at this, okay? That Jesus was not a real person, as in the traditional sense is described in the Bible, but actually more an astrotheological hybrid of a sun god. Let's have a look and explain first off the astrotheological hybrid of the sun god bit. The cross of the zodiac is actually where the cross we've come to know as the Christian cross or the pagan cross has come from, and basically is represented by these two lines that go across here. The cross of the zodiac is divided up into 4 sections by these horizontal and vertical lines, okay? And each of these 4 sections then in turn have 3 months. The 4 sections are the 4 seasons, winter, spring, autumn, and summer. And basically you have the numerical allegory of 3, 4, and 12. So 3 times 4 is 12. But there's something very important, which is the central principle, which is the sun, which is what represents Jesus. And that is obviously represented at the bisecting point of the horizontal and vertical lines. And of course, as we say, that is where you get your cross symbolism from. It is the depiction over here that I want to bring your attention to quickly, and I'll jump back. The solar cross is a depiction of the sun's movements across the sky through the course of the year. The vertical and horizontal lines mark out the solstices and the equinoxes, okay? So that's what these lines are marking out, the solstices and the equinoxes. And of course, the central point is important too. This is a digitized version of the Last Supper, so you can actually have a better look at what it looks like, because the other one's rather damaged. And you can check it out. It's all in here. What you have, 4 groups, 1 group here, 1 group here, 1 group here, and 1 group here. Each group has 3 people in it. And of course, then you have the sun, which would be the center, which is Jesus. Okay? Let's talk about the central point, the center of the circle. The point in the center of the circle, which obviously would make up the point of the center of the cross represented as the sun, was said by Madame Blavatsky, who was the founder of the Theosophical Society. She refers to the point in the center of the circle as the primordial force, the ever-eternal nature, but that from which it emanates is passed over in silence. Very telling. I just love Blavatsky. And here we have a perfect illustration of the allegory that was being demonstrated, which is, in fact, the 4 seasons, okay, each with 3 months in them, winter, spring, summer, and autumn, okay, the groupings that all clump together in distinctive groups, 4 groups of 3 each, and then Jesus in the middle. And in fact, if you take lines from anywhere, see down the middle there and through the center of this painting, you will come to Jesus' face. In fact, from the corners of the painting as well, through the center, it crosses over on Jesus' face, who would be the point within the center of the circle, which would be the point within the center of the cross representative of the sun, which in turn is representative of the cross of the zodiac. See it? The 3, 3, 3, and 3. Jesus being the central principle. Interesting stuff. Okay. The Lost Da Vinci. Still a little controversy over whether this was in fact a painting by Leonardo da Vinci. I most certainly would say that based on some of the techniques used, particularly the shadowing techniques, it most certainly would be. However, I don't think there's very much of his actual paintwork left. This thing was so reconstructed by artists when it was discovered. But nonetheless, one of the most interesting things about this piece of artwork from just a technically superb point of view is this is a glass ball. Incredible to get this kind of detail right down to the bubbles and the reflections in the actual glass itself. Remarkable piece of artwork. And a hell of a lot of effort's gone into making this look extremely accurate. Now, there is a lot of allegory to this glass ball. Leonardo da Vinci wouldn't just paint nothing for nothing, particularly something with such great detail. Again, this hand symbol is very significant. We'll get into that in another lecture, but the glass ball, particularly significant, and this is a theme which comes up quite a bit. Bear with me. Stained glass windows. Now, notice as well here, same hand signals, and we have what? Another orb, a glass. I don't know if that one's glass, but that is an orb. Okay, we've got a ball there, and it's got a cross through the middle, like the solar disk that we've just seen, the cross of the zodiac. So these symbols start turning up everywhere. This depiction of Jesus has him with a halo and a cross as well, as we've just discussed, because he is a solar Messiah. Okay, so stained glass turns up everywhere. I've traveled and I've been to so many different cathedrals and churches and temples across Europe, and just one of the things that amazes me is some of these amazingly artistic and detailed stained glass illustrations and depictions that you can find. And I want to bring your attention to some of the etymology associated with this, because again, this is the archaeology etymology we are dissecting here tonight. That's the primary theme we're going through here. And of course, we spoke about fane being the root word of phantom. All right. We talk about stained glass or a window pane. The word pane is etymologically similar to fane, the root of phantom. And the glass symbol is extremely significant. As we said, we've got the glass turning up here in the Lost da Vinci, the root of window pane being similar to fane, and of course glass is supposedly see-through, or quality of what you would imagine a spirit or phantom to be like, if you can make your mind stretch to that cognitive allegory. And then of course the glass symbol. The story of Cinderella is hugely symbolic of the requirement for the Porphyrogenitus bloodline to marry within the dragon bloodline. An example of this is the expression, if the shoe fits, wear it. So, for example, if you have the right bloodline to marry the prince, marry him. That's what they're saying by that. And this is an incredibly interesting story to go through, and you start to learn that in these stories regarding dragons, there's sometimes talisman, like Arthur's story's got the story of the sword, Thor has his hammer, in Cinderella it's the glass slippers, that thing which defines each person as Porphyrogenitus, purple-born of the dragon bloodline, eligible to marry into the royal ruling class. And I'll get a bit more into the Cinderella stuff in next week's Dragonology, when we start climbing into children's stories and fairy tales a bit more, because that gets extremely interesting. Even fairy tale, fable, all these words are etymologically linked to the dragon, and we'll show you that when we go there next week. But for now, we just want to finish off with what is actually our cultural programming. And of course, sports has become a huge part of modern day culture. In fact, right from the Olympians and the Olympic Games, which were very much ritualistic in ancient Greece and very much a homage to the gods, sport nowadays is very much the same. The ritual of ball sport is a ritual basically because it contains rules and ritual practices. What defines a ritual is anything done at a specific place at a specific time for a specific purpose. That is what defines a ritual, and that is what ball sport does. And very much like all rituals, there are very distinctive rules and themes that have to be done ritualistically and over again. And this, of course, interweaves into the very fabric of reality. And the more you do it, the more it ingrains itself and the more impact it has on the nature of reality by locking down that Ophidian vibration. According to Wikipedia, there are over 140 different types of ball sport. I counted them myself. Let's have a look. Baseball. Baseball is more ritual than it is sport. which is clearly evidenced in the numerology. First off, it's also evidenced in the fact that these players have to stand on Masonic squares, pretty much stationary for most of the game, apart from when they have to run from square to square. But again, it's got the same sort of imagery going on. And the numerology being all multiples or divisibles of 9. For example, 3 times 3, you got 3 strikes, 3 and you're out, 9 fielding positions, 9 innings, 27, which is 9 times 3, 27 out per game, and 9 times 9, 81 home games, 81 games on the road. And this is quite literally the format of professional baseball. And there are so many professional baseballers who were Freemasons, who are Freemasons. Everyone from Babe Ruth to Joe DiMaggio, who married MK Ultra mind-controlled slave Marilyn Monroe. And it's very it's very clear in the evidence as to why we can clearly lay baseball as designed by Freemasons or after Freemasonry. Check it out. I mean, got what looks like tessellated grass almost, but the design of the pitch is pretty much not unlike the Masonic square and compass. And then, of course, football. The Football Association was founded on the 26th of October 1863 at the Freemasons' Arms in London, according to 33rd degree Freemason Christopher L. Haddock. And this is also not very difficult to work out. There's a lot of symbolic allegory again in the numbers and the uniforms and the ritualistic nature of football. And the cult obsession that exists today, for me, is a good indication of just how unhealthy cults are. And this is very much evidenced by things like football hooliganism. It's not unlike religion. You know, you have, for example, 2 different opposing religions who would, go fight each other, but ultimately they're both serving the same negative entity, because all religions are linked to a common root, which is dragon worship. And it's the same thing with ball sport, because you believe in one label more than another, Tottenham as opposed to Chelsea or whatever, you find that a reason to beat the bloody hell out of the person who believes in the other label. Ultimately, it's all about the same thing. It's all about a game, a bunch of, overpaid egos running around a field, throwing a ball around. That's what it's all about. And all your attention goes into that ball. Keep your eye on the ball. Why the ball? The glass ball that shows up, that there's always the orbs in the hand. That's important. All that energy and attention going into the ball. We'll get onto that in a minute. Dragons and balls. Now, I'm sure anyone who's been to a Chinese restaurant or at least seen these dog or dragon-like depictions, dog or lion-like depictions of dragons. I've actually seen one of these outside a Chinese restaurant. They're normally standing on a ball of some sort. This is a pretty common depiction of dragons standing on a ball, much like a football player. And then, of course, there is the obsession with dragons and dragon pearls or dragon balls. In fact, we spoke last week about the 9-dragon wall in China, outside the Imperial Palace, or inside the Imperial Palace Gardens in China, in Beijing. And each of the 9 dragons has its own ball. It's represented on the 9-dragon wall. And there is a beautiful, beautiful allegorical Chinese legend that arose from the dragon pearl about a boy who found a pearl which brought him riches. And then when someone tried to take it from him, he swallowed the pearl and then became a dragon and became the guardian of the river and all of that. But again, there's a lot of allegory there, perhaps to do with gaining knowledge through a Faustian pact. Dragons are always depicted with balls. There's so many depictions of them, clutching balls, going after balls, about to seize the ball. Very common. Just cannot get away from it. And I'll get back to the ball thing in a minute. I just want to get on, explain a little bit about sport and games. Okay, now gaming is also a method of programming, a programming of competitiveness. Competitiveness within a society breeds an idea of scarcity and lack. Okay, any games which has a principle of beating, winning, or highest score, as is the case with football and baseball, all of that is completely predatory. It's a completely contrary to an organic, healthy society. And chess is the perfect example of a board game which was specifically developed to demonstrate symbolically and allegorically hierarchy and enslavement whilst mimicking battle, conflict, and war. Game pieces take up positions on Masonic squares which are tessellated, just like the Falls of St. Paul. And of course, Monopoly. It doesn't take a lot to explain this one. Loved this game when I was a kid, and absolutely designed to fuel greed and materialism in children. You know, all that fake Monopoly money. I used to think it was, I felt rich. I'm real. It's real. I own all these streets. Look at me. You know, and for a moment you think you're king of the world. And, you know, problem is some people begin to really enjoy that egoic feeling and you know, take it for real. And then, of course, Scrabble, which is a word game. And always come back to words and languages because, of course, words and language and speaking and spelling inextricably linked with dragons. A board game played on Masonic squares, okay? The object is to spell out words to acquire the most numerical value. So you're working with letters and words, which are in themselves symbolic allegory, all right? And they're on squares. And then you place these things on squares. Again, all very Masonic. And again, all these games follow a common principle of the highest score wins. Just want to recap before I get on to the next small section on some of the etymology and the roots. We spoke a bit previously about para, which would be the root of paragraph, paraphrase, parallel, paradise, pharaoh. Then, of course, pala or pala, which would be the root of Palestine, palace, and then pior. These three, para, pala, and pior, they are inextricably linked with each other. They are what I'd call a serpent root triad in terms of etymology. Now, there are allegorical words which I want to take you through because it gets real funky at this point, which have transliterated from these and have real tangible allegorical meaning to the dragon. Let me show you. Parler, we spoke about, is an Indo-European and still used in French. It means to speak. We talk about the Pirates Code, invoke the rule of parley, which is the right to speak to the captain of the ship where you're being held captive. So look at the word parley, and it's not unlike the word pearl, except you have the E, which is moved to this position just before the P. So parley and pearl, and we spoke originally about, over here, a dragon pearl, right? The dragon pearl and the dragon pearl legend. So follow me here. We've got parley leading on to pearl. And then we talk about a pear. We've always got this spiraling pair of dragons. Then we've got the fruit, the pear. We talk about apples and pears, which are synonymous with each other. The pear is often an allegory of the dragon. We discussed that in previous dragonologies. All right. And then pior, again, I've just stuck that in here because pior basically links, it transliterates pear into pier. Okay. And as I said, pior is originally part of this root, pala, pala, and pior. It's the original etymological triad there. But you got pair, which transliterates into pior, which transliterates into pier, which pier we'll get into. Then you got appear and disappear. Okay, and it's obviously got the root of what would be pear, the fruit, but said like peer, as in colleagues or esteemed peers or so forth. All right, I'll mention the word pearl. We talk about the dragon pearl, and let's talk about pearls in its other allegorical contexts. the word pearl, spelt parel in Dutch. So you've got pearl with the E being moved from before the P to behind the E, I beg your pardon, behind the R in Dutch. So pearl is parel in Dutch, all the same letters, just moved around. And that is etymologically similar to parlay, all the same letters, yeah, as parel and pearl. So pearl in English, parel means pearl in Dutch, and parlay means to speak. And this allegory is evident in the idiom pearls of wisdom, because the pearls replaces words. Instead of saying words of wisdom, you talk about pearls of wisdom, all right? Because these words are inextricably linked. Pearl and parlay, which means to speak. What do you speak? Words. I hope you can all see the themes carrying through here. And then moving this on, we spoke a bit about the goddess Venus Columba and the root word kolu in Columba last week. Now, Venus Columba was supposedly born from, that's right, an oyster shell, much like a pearl. Now, the word ball is very similar to Baal, okay? Now, Baal Peor, actually, we spoke about the word Peor. Baal Peor was actually an ancient Canaanite god to whom everybody would sacrifice their babies and everybody worshipped. In fact, there's still a place in Lebanon called Baal Peor. And as I said, Baal worship was very much about ritual, sacrifice, blood drinking, all that kind of thing that you cover off in ritual. And as I said, Baal is etymologically cognizant with ball. And Pierre, etymologically cognizant with pure, all right, that we got here, pure, etymologically cognizant with Pierre, and Pierre means to look inquisitively. And the concept of to look inquisitively is cognizant with the concept of to spy. To spy on somebody is to look inquisitively at them, okay, actively watching someone, like a watcher, okay. Oculus means eye, and from oculus we get the word occult, which means hidden, presumably hidden from sight, which again references the eye. So we've got Pierre, which would be to look with the eye inquisitively, cognizant with spy, which is the root of spiro, okay, that comes out the root of spiro, which again references spy, which is to look inquisitively, references the watchers who watch us inquisitively, which brings you to the eye theme of oculus and occult. As you see, we've pretty much come around full circle. And to bring you to the last little bit of very, very interesting, this just gets more and more interesting as you go along. We spoke a little bit about the key themes of metamorphosis and disappearance, or theophania. Metamorphosis, obviously the ability to change from a human form or a dragon form into another form and then back again, a physical shapeshift or shape change. That was the one theme. And then there was the other theme of a physical shapeshift, a shape change to a being doesn't change to another shape being, but actually disincarnates completely. So one minute they're there, the next minute they're not. So, or they're there. So they suddenly appear, or they can suddenly disappear. And we brought that concept down to something last few times that we've spoken in Dragonology as being the concept of the theophany, okay, or theophania. So to appear or disappear is cognitive of the meaning of theophania, the root word the, and then phane, like phantom, okay, phantom, like ghost, which can either appear or disappear with the peer root word in it. So just like theophania has the serpentine root words the and phanon, the same actual meaning to appear or disappear, which is what the concept of theophania is, actually has a serpent root word in it too. All right? Think about that. It's hugely symbolically allegorical. And of course, we are finished. We're at the end. And I like to finish this with a little bit of humor. So, I couldn't resist it but to mush some words together and see what we got. When you put Pio and Venus together, what do we get? Penis. With that, we have reached the end of episode 4 of Dragonology. Episode 5 is on the 23rd of April, 4 p.m. New York time, 9 p.m. London time, 10 p.m. Central European, South African time, and of course it's on Friday the 24th of April at 6 a.m. Sydney time for you folks in Australia. If you can get up that early, and if you have gotten up that early, I hope it's been worth it. Please do tune into some of our amazing content on Conscious Consumer Network. This is a live broadcasting channel that has been developed especially for the alternative media. It was set up from scratch by myself and my partner Biggie to create the kind of platform that we can put this kind of information out to people. So please do, guys, support for an independent media. Go to consciousconsumernetwork.tv and click on the red heart if you wish to pledge us some of your energetic currency. That would be great. Show some appreciation for the work that we do. We are trying to, at the moment, get the Encyclopedia of Dragons, the Dragonology Encyclopedia, actually covered off in terms of project costs. So if you are interested in seeing the series of Dragonology evolving into the amazing book that it has become and actually seeing that being put out to the public, feel free to contribute to that cause. It certainly is a worthy one. And that's it from me. I thank you, as always, for your time and attention. My name is Mel V, and it's been a pleasure being with you. We'll see you next week.